You know, David Anderson is a member of Parliament with Cypress Hills, Grasslands, and good old Saskatchewan. And he is our next guest on Life Changing Television. Would you welcome him now? David, nice to meet you and nice to be with you today.
Oh, it's great to be here, Brian.
You know, one of the things that as I was preparing that I was so refreshed with and gripped with was your down-to-earth nature, not being a diva, and and being involved with a lot of very serious issues. Where's your groundedness come from?
Well, I'm actually from a small town in Saskatchewan. My parents were farm people. The whole community is an agricultural area, and you may be able to get away with pretending to be something you aren't in Ottawa, but you certainly can't do that in the small town of Frontier, Saskatchewan. We've got a great people there. It's a progressive community, and it's been a good place for me to grow up and to live.
You know, and I appreciate that. Do you believe that politics is a calling, or is it just a position?
Well, I really believe that it's a calling. I think in some ways, you know, if we're following God in our lives, we fall into things. He leads us into things that we wouldn't necessarily do if we were planning things ourselves, and certainly that seems to be how I've ended up here. But I think for the Christian MPs on the Hill, that they would definitely see what they're doing as a calling, as something that God has brought them to, and a privilege that He's given us in the season that we have to do this job.
And it is a season when you look at some of the things that are taking place, not only in the United States, you look in Canada and also around the world. These are interesting times.
Well, they certainly are, and they certainly are for people of faith, because we live in a world that's rapidly changing, and for those of us who believe that Jesus Christ has answers to life's questions, certainly we need to be able to make those adjustments, and we need to understand our times so that we can reach out as well.
You know, it's funny when you talk about Christian faith, because a lot of young people today feel like politics is a useless exercise. Do you still think a young person can make a difference in politics today?
Oh, absolutely. One of the things we're going to talk about a little bit later is the National Prayer Breakfast, but clearly one of the young folks in Canada, her name is Joycelyn Eng, had decided a couple of years ago that she wanted to make a difference, and she has been the one who's put together a student forum that is now a part of the National Prayer Breakfast events that take place. She organizes, and they bring students in at their own cost from across the country. Between 50 and 100 of them come down during the prayer breakfast times to have some seminars, to learn a little bit more about how faith can interact in the public realm. So she'd be a great example of a young person who really does believe she can make a difference, and she's done that.
You know, you talk about the prayer breakfast. On May the 28th, something's going to take place in Ottawa. And for a lot of us that don't know exactly what's taking place on the Hill, you've been engaged in, for the last 3 years, of bringing a specific initiative to Parliament. Tell us about that.
Well, this event goes far beyond me, because this is the 44th annual prayer breakfast, National Prayer Breakfast, that's going to be taking place at the end of May. I've been involved as chair for the last 3 years, so it's been a great privilege to be able to be part of that. There are a number of events associated with that. We have a supper on Wednesday night. We have a prayer breakfast on Thursday morning. There's a seminar after the prayer breakfast. And then, as I mentioned, the student forum accompanies that as well. So there's the real coming together of a number of events here. It's been going on for a long time. And we get people coming from right across Canada to be part of it.
You know, I'm thrilled about you personally, and even with this, because if we rewind, you've been able to do the impossible, allow your public life and also your private faith to connect together and converge together. Where did it start for you?
Well, I didn't actually become a Christian until I was about 21 and a half years old. Christmas, or actually it was New Year's Eve going into 1979, when I sat in a small church in my hometown. I just said, Lord, if you're there, I'm interested in having you reveal yourself to me. If you're not, I'm willing to go back to the life that I led before. And He clearly showed Himself to me. A couple of years later, I was fortunate enough to be able to spend some time at L'Abri, Francis Schaeffer Study Center in Switzerland, which really did change my life, because they taught that we should be able to take our Christian faith into every area of life, that we shouldn't be dividing it off from certain areas. So ever since then, I've really felt that I can take my Christian life with me into whatever I'm doing, whether it's my farming, whether it's my political life. It should be part of my family life as well. And so life's been exciting because of that.
Well, you know, it has to be exciting, because you talk about 21. I think there's a lot of people that can identify with that not only at 21, you said something that was very interesting to me. You said, God, either you show me to yourself, show me who you are, or I'm going to do what?
Well, I just said I'm willing to go back to the life that I was living before. But the really important thing was that he did show himself to me within, I would say within 3 or 4 weeks. I had confidence that he was who he claimed to be. That came primarily through the people at a small Bible school that I was allowed into. It came from reading the Scripture.
Hold on for a second. You accepted Christ, and then you're going to Bible school right after that?
Well, my sister was going to a Bible school, and I actually called them up and said, "Do you think I could come?" And they let me in the middle of a semester. Probably, I think it was 3 or 4 days after I'd made this request of God, and they allowed me into the Bible school in the middle of a semester. Right away, I was exposed to some people who really showed me love without knowing who I was. A couple of weeks later, I was acquainted with a couple of the video series of Francis Schaeffer, which began my career, and then or my real focus.
Yes.
And then obviously the Scriptures started to come alive in ways that I'd never seen before, and that has just been a core part of my life as well.
As a core part of your life, how's that been reflected when you see on Parliament Hill? How have you been able to see that sort of walk out?
Well, I think it's probably the same challenge that virtually everybody else faces, and that is to have Christ come into our lives in a way that significantly impacts our life first, and then to try to allow God to make us consistent enough that hopefully we can have some impact on other people, that they can see that He's real and that He really can change lives. And that's the challenge for every person, whether we're on Parliament Hill or if we're driving a tractor or if we're driving a cab or playing football. It doesn't matter.
Well, you know what? And you are doing it as well. I told you He was real, and one of the things I appreciate about that. Let's get a page up so we can find out a little bit more about the day of and what's going to take place. Could you tell us about that?
Well, Thursday, May 28th at the Crown Plaza in Ottawa, we're going to have the National Prayer Breakfast. We're almost full, so if people want to get in, they're going to have to contact us.
What's the capacity on that?
Well, the capacity is only about 850 people. We were in the Congress Center last year. They're doing some renovations, so this venue is a little bit smaller.
Yes.
So if folks want to come, they're going to have to contact us fairly quickly.
And they better do that very quickly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
People across Canada are invited. It's open to everyone. It's open to people of all faiths, all communities. I actually should acknowledge some of my staff members. This is done with about 4 volunteer people who do most of the work. And
I want everyone to get this number as well. That's 613, and that is 995-1616. Make sure that you write that down, 613-995-1616, because as David said, or the Honorable David Anderson has said, that there's not much room left, and it's going to happen pretty quickly. That's May the 28th, and it's going to take place. You can also email at canadaprayerbreakfast.ca, and you can get all the information. And this is going to go directly to the Honorable David Anderson as well. This is his email, Anderson at parliamentgc.ca as well. So, I mean, one of the things I really appreciate about this, I've heard that there's going to be maybe a Zechariah showing up somewhere around there.
Well, we've been able to bring in some speakers who have really spoken to people across the country, and I think this year when people come out, they'll be very happy to hear the folks that we've got out. We don't typically advertise ahead of time who's speaking, but I think people will be very impressed with the 2 or 3 main people who are coming out this year.
You know, I knew going head-to-head with the parliamentary secretary that I could probably needle that out of you, because they don't really announce who the speakers are, but you're going to want to be there because they have some pretty high-powered people that are coming in, and it's going to be an event. I'd also encourage you to pray for this if you're not going to be there, because from what I've heard from a little bird and maybe a voice is there are a lot of MPs that are on Parliament, but they also need prayer. And the area of marriages and also some of these issues. Could you just touch on that just for a second, how we could pray?
Well, I actually think this is maybe the most important message that we have today, that we need Canadians across this country to pray for their members of Parliament, to pray for their leaders. They need to pray for wisdom so that we've got the wisdom to make good decisions, but they really do need to pray for families, for spouses, that people would be able to maintain the strength in their marriage, that they would remember that their families need to be preeminent in their lives. There's a lot of challenges that we face because we're separated lots. We're in Ottawa, our families are back home in the ridings. And so I really think that that's an important thing that Canadians can do to help us out.
And I think we all are going to take that up. I'm going to take that up as with Canada in prayer. And I'd ask you even pray now, but continue to pray and make a point to be there on the 28th for the prayer breakfast as well. And thank you, the Honorable David Anderson and brother.